The information provided in this podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be considered as personal advice. Always consult with a qualified professional or expert in the relevant field for personalised advice tailored to your specific situation.
If you have a situation where you believe you're going to be on claim, you could be on claim for TPD or trauma, terminal illness, or income protection. What I say to people is go talk to your financial advisor. What they can do is find strategies to help maximize the amount of income you're going to get and actually also maximize benefit payment you get to keep, not just now, but in the future as well.
Welcome to the next episode of the Wealth Guide podcast, brought to you by Ryker Capital. I'm joined again today by our fearless founder, Ray Regmi, but we've also got a very, very special guest speaker. Now, Jeff Scott gave me his bio, and it's about a page long.
We're not doing this again, are we?
So I'm not going to read out all of your degrees again, Jeff.
That's okay.
But do tell us, do you get paid to do all of these degrees or do you have a life? Is this your hobby?
I wouldn't call it a hobby. I believe in lifelong learning. So that's why I did it. My hobby is I referee ice hockey for fun. Did it at an international level and up until very, very recently. And I get paid in my current job with MetLife is I get paid to eat, travel, and talk. So I give education seminars to financial advisors and accountants and solicitors around the country. So yeah, I've got a life outside. I'm actually in a relationship too, so that's not bad either.
So you just have an enormous amount of capacity to do awesome things in this life.
I follow my passion, and my passion is I love learning. Hate studying, but love learning. And that's basically what that reflects.
Yeah. Well, funny, especially when you talk about tax, Jeff, and our topic today happens to be about, do I pay taxes when I die? Look, Benjamin Franklin quoted, one thing in life is certain, death and taxes.
Yes.
What do you think about that, Jeff?
I think Ben's wrong. He was a very learned man and he was very smart. But when I look at Australian tax law, nothing can be further from the truth. And the first thing is, let's take death, for example. We have a situation where a person dies and that's certain. People go, yeah, that's great. The thing is from a tax perspective, we have a particular part of the Tax Act that basically says if I suffer a terminal medical condition, then the insurance company, my super fund, will actually pay my death benefit early.
Right.
So they pay it. So usually if I have less than either 12 months to live or 24 months to live, my super fund will have the right to pay my death benefit early, and my insurance policy also has the right to pay my death benefit early. It's called a terminal illness benefit or terminal medical condition. Now, if you get that paid to you and you have a miraculous recovery, the ATO, when it gets paid to you, it gets paid to you tax-free.
Yeah.
Both from your super fund and from your insurance policy, it gets paid tax-free. Now, if you have a miraculous recovery and don't die, then the ATO doesn't ask for the money back and doesn't tax you on it. Why? Because for taxation purposes, you're dead.
Wow.
So is death certain? The answer is, well, no. Terminal medical condition basically says they treat you as a dead person as far as the money being paid to you, but you're actually not dead. And so is death certain? Not for tax purposes. The ATO says, no, you don't actually have to be dead to receive a death benefit tax-free.
That makes sense.
So that's the first bit. And then the second one is, are taxes certain? And again, when I look at taxation of life insurance, I can have the same life insured with the same sum insured and the same beneficiary having three totally different taxation outcomes. And people think, they go, how's that? It's based on who the owner is. So if I own the policy on my own life versus if my employer owns the policy on my life and that they're providing an employee benefit versus I have that policy owned through my super fund, I could have three totally different taxation outcomes, both from tax deductibility of the premiums and taxation of the benefits.
Funny you say that, Jeff. Your employer owns a policy on you?
Yeah.
I thought they were a bit more American.
There are group insurance policies here in Australia, and what you often find is group salary continuance or group income protection policies are quite common, especially for large employers, especially if it's a multinational employer.
Right.
And they'll often have income protection policies. Some of them will have death policies and some will have TPD policies as well, because they want to make sure that all their employees around the world are treated the same.
Right.
And so what you'll find is that many employers have said, no, we'll put it through the super fund. And if we're going to have it, we'll have it through superannuation. But some will actually have it that they'll have a group insurance policy owned on all their employees for death for TPD and sometimes income protection or salary continuance.
I see.
What an amazing benefit to have. I think that's something for us to all take note of and go home and have a look to see if our employer actually covers us.
Yeah.
Well, you do have a little bit of authority in this space, though, potentially more than Benjamin Franklin, because one of the things that I noticed on your bio is that you've achieved something really fantastic for Australia in introducing the first terminal illness benefit into our insurance industry. That's an achievement.
Thank you. I was still an undergrad when I working for this little insurance company here in Australia. And I was working for A&P. It was my first job in Australia. And I went to my boss, who was an actuary, and I said, I've got an idea for a product design. He goes, what's that, Jeffrey? I said, is it called a terminal illness benefit? And he goes, what does it do? I said, well, if the person is terminally ill, so suffers a terminal medical condition, and has less than 12 months to live, we pay the death benefit early. And he looked at me, he pondered for a minute, and he goes, interesting marketing concept, Jeffrey, but it will never, ever work in Australia. And the reason where I came up with the idea was there was a gentleman by the name of Ron Barbaro over in Canada who introduced a terminal illness benefit in 1988 through Prudential America's policies. And he was based out of Toronto, Canada, and I got to read up on it, got to talk to a couple of my insurance agent friends who were selling this policy. And I said, that's a really good idea. I took Ron's design, came to Australia, and then designed the terminal illness benefit here.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. I want to talk a little bit more about this concept of tax and death, though.
Yes.
Because as much fun it is to disprove a presidential theory, it does become a reality for a lot of our clients. So as much fun as it is to disprove a presidential theory of taxes and death being the 1, 2, 3, 4 certainties in life, it becomes a reality for a lot of our clients, Ray. So as financial advisors, you do really have to understand some of these concepts, because if you take out insurance, especially in the space of life cover that pays out when you pass away, there are tax implications. So share with us some of the stories of clients we've helped to ensure that we minimize those taxes where possible and appropriate.
Absolutely, Jazz. I think I want to use the example of the story that we shared in our previous podcast. So there's two ways a policy can be structured normally. So for individuals, it's mostly around either inside your super fund. So when you first start your job, you get this policy inside your super, or out from your bank account, which is normally what you would normally pay from your bank account, where an insurance company will debit out of your bank account or your credit card.
Yep.
Now, there's two differences being that any policy that's held inside super, you have to nominate a beneficiary. Now, most people will have that in the form of either what they call a binding or a non-binding beneficiary. Now, the tax that's paid upon someone's passing away will depend on who is the ultimate beneficiary at that point in time. So if it's kids who are over the age of 18, will potentially pay a tax of 35% and over.
32,
pardon me.
Yep.
Or if it's a spouse, it could be completely tax-free.
Oh, yeah, I think that reminds me, there is a legislation, isn't there? As financial planners, we call it the SIS Act. What does that again stand for, Jeff?
Superannuation Industry Supervision Act.
That's a mouthful.
It is. It's a fascinating read if you are suffering from insomnia.
I take it you've read it.
I have, and like I said, it becomes excellent bedtime reading.
What's a dependent as part of that act? What does the government mean when they say that?
Well, that's the problem, is that dependency under the SIS Act, or Superannuation Industry Supervision Act, and industry under the Tax Act isn't always the same. So what we have is, if you're a spouse, and a spouse can be a person that you're legally married to, and that means same sex or opposite sex relationship. It can be a person in a bona fide de facto relationship with, perfectly okay. So spouse is one dependent, and they're basically, it's the same under both SIS Act and the Tax Act, which is great, which is what Ray just mentioned. There's people who are former spouses. Now, under the SIS Act, a former spouse is not a dependent, but under the Tax Act, they are. And people go, well, why is that so important? Well, a former spouse is not deemed to be a spouse under the SIS Act, but they might fall under another category. And the other category is people who are financially dependent upon you. Can a former spouse be financially dependent upon you? Well, if they're receiving maintenance or ongoing maintenance or support payments, then they can prove that they're receiving payments that are regular, periodic, and expected. That proves financial dependency. If you can prove financial dependency under the SIS Act, then under the Tax Act, that former spouse is allowed to get the money tax-free. And it's why when you go through a marital breakdown, which again, I've gone through a couple, one of the first things you should do is make sure you change your nominated beneficiary. The other one that you have is we talked about children. Now, under the SIS Act, children of any age are entitled to the benefit payments from the super fund. But once you get over the age of 18, then you're no longer deemed to be a tax dependent, and you're taxed at penalty rates, up to 32% in some cases. We then come to people who are what's in an interdependency relationship, which means that you're providing either financial and or emotional support to people. So if you have a person who's looking after an elderly parent under the same household, that could be interdependency. And again, under the SIS Act and Tax Act, treated the same. And then people with financial dependence are same under both. So the two differences that we see, one is former spouses and the other one is children.
Yeah.
And so under those two situations, the SIS Act says, who can we pay the money to? And the Tax Act says, when they receive the money, how is it taxed?
That makes so much more sense than before. But it really also shows the need to have someone help you make those decisions. So you may need to reach out to a legal practitioner, financial advisor. Ray, you mentioned something earlier around a beneficiary on my life insurance policy.
Yep.
How does that work?
It's a common process to have in either superannuation or directly to a life insurance policy. To simply put, is basically nominating who you'd want the money to go to in the event of an unforeseen circumstance where someone passes away.
Okay. Well, that would make total sense. Obviously, I've taken that life policy out to benefit someone if I'm not here anymore.
Yeah.
Are there any differences in tax between an insurance policy that I own outright and pay for from my bank account or my credit card, or those insurance policies that are owned through super?
There is, and as previously Jeff mentioned, once the policies are paid from your after-tax dollars, they're tax-free.
Great.
But whereas if the policies are paid out of your superannuation, there are definitely some tax consequences there to the end beneficiary, all depending on how they're structured and who they are.
Okay. So I take
there may not be taxes either.
Yes, and that's what I'm sort of thinking. So if you're clever enough to think about those different scenarios, you can potentially rearrange your beneficiary nominations and your overall asset distribution in a way that you can minimize the tax.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay. So definitely go and seek some advice on that and make sure that you make the right decisions.
Yeah.
Look, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is probably just a little bit of clarity on the way that the different insurance policies are taxed as well. But before we do that, why don't you outline to us, Jeff, what personal insurance cover is there and what's available and what does it actually do?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, what does it do? Insurance is designed to do two things. First thing is to pay off debt or potential debt. And second thing is to create an income stream or replace lost income. Now, again, it can be used for other things as well, but those are the two biggies. So once I look at that's what I'm wanting to do, then what are the various options available to me? And there's 4 basic types of policies. The death cover policy does is that it pays a lump sum to either yourself if you're terminally ill or to your nominated beneficiaries when you pass away as a lump sum. There's then total and permanent disability cover that pays you a lump sum if you're permanently unable to work due to injury, illness, or disease, and never going to work again. There's then a trauma cover benefit, and what trauma cover effectively does, it pays you a lump sum if you suffer a defined medical condition. And again, with most insurance policies, there's between 40 to 60 medical conditions, but the ones that you see the most claims on are what we call the big 4. So serious cancers, serious heart attacks, serious strokes, and coronary artery bypass surgery. So those are the big 4, and that's between 70 to 90% of all claims. Then finally is income protection cover. So income cover, effectively what it does, it replaces between 70 to 75% of your income through regular monthly payments for as long as you're off work due to, again, injury, illness, or disease.
Look, that's really comprehensive. And I think that there's a lot of things you can do. When you talked about the last cover there, you're saying it can replace my income. What sort of taxes are payable on that?
Effectively, since your income is taxed at your marginal rate and PAYG, this will be taxed at the exact same situation. So since it's designed to replace your lost income, it's taxed the same way as your income you get from your employer.
Jeff, also on that, I just wanted to pick your brain there. If I have an income projection or a life TPD policy through the super fund, does my super fund claim a tax deduction on that?
They can. And again, so the super fund gets certain tax deductions on paying insurance premiums.
Yeah.
Some of them will pass that tax deduction along to the member and as a savings to the premiums. Others basically use it to offset investment income elsewhere. So it depends on where they want to, what they want to do with that.
So there is a tendency of super funds to provide that tax deduction for the premiums that I've just paid out of my super.
They can.
Right.
So again, the tax deduction is not at the individual member level. Where the tax deduction is at the fund level. So if they want to pass it back to the member, they can, but they're under no obligation to under the tax law.
So if I think about a strategy here, I'm effectively getting two bites of the cherry here. And what I mean by that is if I make a contribution to pay for my insurance premiums in my super, same money then also for the premium that I've paid, also my super fund's going to claim the tax deduction. Mm-hmm. How good is that?
Well, it means that when you pay that premium into the super fund, when it comes to that 15%
rebate,
well, basically the 15% contributions tax goes away because the insurance premiums are tax deductible.
Let's deep dive a little bit further into that. So we're talking about taxes today and how we don't want to pay them if we don't have to. So what are some of the things you can do as an individual, considering superannuation as a topic, to save tax along the way?
Yeah, but I love this because effectively what I've used ATO to pay for some of my premiums.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is ultimately what you're wanting to do is why I have such a focus on tax when I'm talking to financial advisors and accountants and solicitors is that what you want to have is that if something bad happens, what's the net amount that's going to go into the client's pocket after all the taxes are paid? And when we're looking at the various covers, if I've got death cover, TPD cover, or trauma cover, outside super, and I own the policy by myself, then when that money gets paid to me, whatever that sum insured is, so my insurance policy, that's what's going to get paid to me. So there's no tax paid on that. For income protection cover, again, have that outside super, I will pay tax on that. And that's, again, taxed the same way as it would my salary or wages. When I look at what we have with regards to inside super, now the question becomes that how does that get taxed? And when my death benefit gets paid out, if it's paid to a tax dependent, we talked about those before, and normally I'm going to nominate my spouse, but I might nominate somebody else, gets paid to a tax dependent, now that comes out tax-free. I nominate a non-tax dependent, such as my adult age kids, so let's say that they're 35 or 40 or whatever the number is. When the money gets paid to them, they're not going to get the full amount that I have inside my super fund. What's going to happen is that amount will be taxed at somewhere between 15% and 32%, depending upon the calculations. And there's a fancy calculation in the Tax Act, and it says that you're going to donate a certain amount to the ATO before the money gets paid to those beneficiaries. So if you're wanting to do estate equalization with regards to your adult age kids, say, okay, this kid's going to get the house and this other kid is going to get my super fund. You have to remember that super fund will have a certain amount of money taken out before it gets paid to that child, to that adult age child. With TPD as well, when that money comes out of my super fund, depending upon how old I am and the rest of it, how long I've been a member of the super fund, a TPD benefit paid out of superannuation, I may pay as little as 0, or I could be paying up to 22% tax.
Right.
So if I'm paying up to 22% tax, then that net amount I have, if I was going to use that money to pay off my mortgage, then I may have up to 22% less than what I was expecting to pay off my mortgage.
Yeah.
So it's making sure that you sit down with your financial advisor and make sure that the net amount that's going to be paid to you after tax is going to be appropriate for all your financial circumstances.
That makes sense. Sorry, Jeff. My mind's blown here. I still want to go back to the two bites of the cherry.
Yep. Let's go.
So here's a strategy, right? Mm-hmm. So like I mentioned before, my premiums are $3,000. Instead of me paying that to the insurance company, I'm going to put that in my super.
Yep.
Now, I'm going to claim that as a tax deduction.
Correct.
Because I'm under the threshold. I am then going to utilize that $3,000, which is going to be taxed 15% on the way in, but I'll get a rebate for that. But because I pay the premiums, that $3,000 my super fund will claim as a tax deduction on the earnings.
Correct.
So literally, if someone's on a 35 or 40% marginal tax rate, they've got 80 to pay 55% of that premium.
Yeah. It's one of those things that when you look at all things being equal, and the example that I gave is that if you're paying for, let's say, death cover outside super straight from your bank account with your own policy, or you have death cover inside super that you're nominating your spouse to be the beneficiary. So again, the end tax result is not going to be any different. What's going to give you a better tax result? And effectively, the one you're paying in after-tax dollars, and the other one you get a tax deduction based on your concessional contributions. And it doesn't actually erode your retirement balance as well because your super fund gets it as a tax deduction, so they're not paying 15% contributions tax on that amount. So effectively, you're not eroding your retirement balance. The same premium you pay outside, you can pay inside, and you basically save on that tax.
As long as you're under the concessional cap.
Yeah. So that $27,500.
Well, but to me, this makes complete sense, guys, because, I mean, the government is trying to make sure that we, protect ourselves financially. They don't want Australians to be in the position where they can't pay their way. So they make it possible for us to have insurances, and some of those are tax deductible because they want to support that little bit of extra kind of push to make it affordable for people. And then it also makes complete sense to me that whatever you're popping into the super fund, that you're, paying a little bit of money over time to reach an outcome towards the end of your working life, where you can, again, look after yourself in retirement. Yep. So I know you're very excited about the tax deductions, but I think the government is very self-serving here in just making sure that people do this. So people insure themselves, people save for their retirement. So they're really putting the cherry on top, as you're calling it, to make sure that people actually take advantage of this. So it's nothing untoward about it. It's totally legal. Do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of us should.
But again, I would highly recommend that you do speak to an advisor, purely because the intricacies around structuring some of these policies and how they're paid back out to the beneficiaries, you want to make sure that that's tax-free.
Yes.
So whilst you're utilising all the good stuff that's happening with the tax deduction and getting ATO to potentially pay up to the 55% of your insurance premiums, you want to make sure that on the way out,
yes, you're prepared.
It's structured out as a tax-free policy. Yep.
And again, the question then becomes that if a person from a cash flow perspective says, well, I can't afford this out of my bank account, I need to find an alternative. Then if you put it inside your super fund, then do you need to gross it up to gross up the sum insured to cover for that potential tax liability?
Yeah.
So it's making sure that you understand what the ramifications are, so that net amount that gets paid to the client to look after their financial situation and protect their family and protect their standard of living ends up being the same net amount in their bank account after the fact.
But would it be fair to say, Jeff, that it may potentially need to be grossed out depending on who the beneficiary would be?
Correct. So again, if from a TPD perspective, you might have to gross it up. If it's an adult age child, you may have to gross it up. Yep. If it's your spouse, you probably don't.
Now, is there a scenario where TPD, we don't have to pay tax?
There is. Effectively, with the way the calculations work, if I join the fund today, and when I join the fund, I then cross the street and I'm hit by a proverbial bus, then effectively I become totally and permanently disabled on the day I join the fund. And that means that I will have that means from that day I join the fund all the way through to age 65, that will be my what's called a tax-free component, which means I pay zero tax on it. For every additional day I'm in the fund, it basically increases what's called this taxable component, which means I could pay, again, up to 22% tax.
Now, another thing that sort of crossed my mind, what if I was to turn that into perhaps an income stream rather than taking it as a lump sum?
Great question. Because if let's say I suffer a situation where I'm totally and permanently disabled, there is no obligation for me to take that money out of my super fund. So once I turn age 60, any benefit comes out of superannuation is tax-free. And alternatively, if I don't want to pay that lump sum tax, then an alternative is I might want to commence what's called a superannuation disability pension, that the money I take out will be taxed at my marginal tax rate less a 15% tax offset. So depending upon how much I take out, I may actually pay zero tax.
How good. Effectively, I can treat this like my bank account.
Possibly.
Where I can just simply take out a tax-free amount of income up to that amount. And if I would have taken out a lump sum, I'm at a much more unfavorable position as far as tax goes.
Potentially. And again, by drip feeding it out, you can then manage the investments and make sure the client, again, if people have difficulty managing their money, having a regular income stream coming through is a nice way to manage it. And again, it gives people options. So that if they need a lump sum to pay off the mortgage, you have that option. If they want to basically commence an income stream, they have that option as well. So effectively, by having that insurance inside super, it gives the client options as to how they want to manage it. They might want to take out the entire lump sum now. They might want to start an income stream now, but they don't have to commence either until they want to. And if they have other assets they'd rather use, or they've got an income protection policy outside super that they're receiving ongoing income from, that they don't need the money inside super, then they can let it stay there, and just have the assets continue to increase to provide for the retirement funding.
My mind's racing here. Now, let's just say if they didn't take out that TPD policy, which is now accessible regardless, which is sitting in the super fund,
yes,
and if they are potentially eligible for Centrelink benefits, that'd be a great position to be in.
And that's the thing, is that if I'm under age 65, my assets inside super don't count towards a Centrelink assets or income test.
How good.
Where if I had that same benefit outside super, that if I have it sitting in my bank account, then it's going to count towards the assets test, and it's likely going to be a deemed income with regards to that money sitting in my bank account if I was outside super. So again, depending upon age, depending upon structuring, there's nothing forcing someone that they have the money inside super. There's nothing forcing them to take it out. And the one good thing is until you hit age 67, it's not counted towards the income or assets test.
Right. So it just goes to show that every person's situation can be so different with regards to structuring your policy, with regards to claim, with regards to other ancillary benefits that may be around you or accessible to you.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing, is that if you have a situation where you believe you're going to be on claim, and you could be on claim for TPD or trauma or terminal illness or income protection, what I say to people is go talk to your financial advisor, because what they can do is find strategies to help maximize the amount of income you're going to get, and actually also maximize how much of that benefit payment you get to keep, not just now, but in the future as well.
Love it.
Look, I think that really rounds things off for us today. If you're in a position where you need to work out how much tax you need to pay, how much insurance you need, or make any of these difficult financial positions, my advice is to seek advice.
Correct.
So work with your accountants, work with your financial advisors, maybe even with your mortgage brokers or lending institutions to understand what your options are, and then overlay that with your own goals. Because it's not always a position where you are able to think clearly. It's sometimes a difficult time if you've lost a loved one or you've suffered an unexpected illness or injury. So it would absolutely be my full recommendation to take a breath, get some support, get some help, make sure that you're clear on your goals, and then by all means, don't pay any tax you don't have to. I think we've definitely proven Benjamin Franklin wrong there. It's been an absolute privilege to have you with us today, Dr. Jeff Scott.
Thanks. The one thing I will say
Yes.
is that I know how complex the tax law is. It's something I've studied for years. If you are having questions about it, see a professional. See a person who's an expert who can help you manage it, who can help you structure it, and make sure that you can get, and what the ATO has effectively done, what the tax laws do, is they encourage you to invest in particular ways, and they discourage you from doing other things. And so what you can do is, if you have a person who's an expert in that field, they can structure it so you get the best benefit that's all legal and what the ATO is actually encouraging you to do.
So make sure you don't pay any tax you don't have to. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Wealth Guide. Have a great day.